So, designing for humanity. I'm hoping what you're going to get out of this talk is ways and methods to ensure that technology serves humanity versus the opposite. Real simple thing there. So I think we'll go through about 3 chapters in this presentation, talk about where we are with technology, some of the challenges, and some of where we're going next, and some of the interesting paradoxes that happen with some of this, especially with AI and some of these new technologies that are intending to drive a lot of positive outcomes with humans, but also has maybe some unintended consequences as well. And then I'll go through a few tips and methods on how to design for humanity and show a few case studies of some of the work that we've been doing at IBM to ensure that we usher in technology in a really ethical way. So trying to keep it interactive as well. So I'm in a small audience participation with hand raises and things. But just to level set where we are today with technology, it's actually an amazing time if you think about it. In most cases, this new technology around whether it's IoT devices, raise of hands, who has a smart home in the room or uses things like Nest or those types of devices. Yeah, so a few of you, all the way through to quantified self, Apple Watch users or Fitbit users in the audience. Yeah. So you're getting all this new metrics and data around your own sort of way you live your life, and actually gives you interesting insights to improve your lifestyle. Obviously, autonomous driving is coming soon. The shared economy, whether it's Airbnb or Uber, just completely unlocking what the sense of the world community means to you and what you're able to do. So amazing technology, amazing innovations in humanity, and so many more things we can do together. I'll just call out 2 examples up here. On the upper right is the new biometric terminal that Delta just launched in Atlanta. Has anybody been through that yet? It's going to be scaled globally very soon, but the point is they're using AI and different types of technologies to streamline that entire basically check-in process, customs process. So it's sort of a twofold. It's a win-win. It's great for the customer experience. It's being streamlined, but it's also great for Delta and for security reasons as well. So great use of technology there. And then I'll also just point out on the upper left, second over, this is Walmart's application of blockchain in their grocery business. So being able to track the food from farm to shelf has been a problem for them. So if there's ever a foodborne illness or any sort of issue that they need to correct, it takes about a week to understand where the produce sort of went along the chain to, and was affected. So that's obviously causes a lot of waste, a lot of cost, and obviously more illness for humans. So with blockchain, they've reduced that from a week down to 2.2 seconds. So amazing improvement across the board. So really good examples of how technology has changed our life for the better. So what's next? In the intro and on the blurb of the talk, we described this concept of the 4th Industrial Revolution, and it's the convergence of data, unlimited storage, higher processing speeds, AI, connectivity with 5G, all these different technologies converging to kind of take us to the next innovation, next revolution. So at IBM, we're focusing, I'll just share a few things that we're focusing on data, processing speeds with quantum, and our new flavor of AI. So from a data standpoint, our latest estimate is that only 1% of the world's data is actually being collected and analyzed. So think about that, 1%. And yet, all you hear about is big data, and we're surrounded by data, but actually, we really aren't yet. So think about new sensors and new data points that we can capture, and the insights that we could pull out of them is really limitless. The example up here is a partnership we're doing with Michael J. Fox's Foundation for Parkinson's Research. And what we've developed here is a tiny little sensor that you can put on a fingernail, and it actually measures the flexibility and the bend of the fingernail at a very, very sensitive level. And you say, well, what's the point of that? Why is that important? Well, for Parkinson's patients, it's the grip strength, which is the first indication, the first symptom of a problem. So by getting that early detection, you can then proceed with diagnosis and sort of getting ahead of the situation much earlier. So really interesting tech there, really amazing potential for improving those people's lives. Second area is around speed and processing speeds. And IBM is one of the first companies to invent a quantum computer. I've actually seen the quantum computer. It's up in New York State. It's an amazing device. If you've seen photos of it, it looks like a chandelier. But it's encased in this tube, and it's actually kept at 100 times below the freezing level of space. I mean, it's absolutely freezing because of the calculations that are happening within this machine. It's a fantastic piece of hardware. And what we're just recently announced is we've made it a commercial instance of it. And we've brought in some Fortune 500 companies to actually use the quantum computer to solve issues around, or not, very complex issues around financial risk modeling, and things that, calculations that just weren't possible with today's computers. So ExxonMobil, for example, is trying to understand energy at an atomic level now, stuff that just wasn't possible. And with that type of information, they'll be able to improve fuel sources moving on. So incredible advances in quantum. And then the third I just wanted to highlight was around the evolution of AI. So for those of you in the audience that know a little bit about AI, we've sort of defined it as narrow AI, which is a little bit more of your transactional machine learning type of AI, where you give it a data set, you give it some instructions, and the computer just cranks it out at scale. But you pretty much know what you're going to get. So an example of narrow AI would be the Watson computer at Jeopardy. That if you all remember the big Jeopardy competition that happened, where Watson was basically understanding the question, searching the world's database, and coming back with the right answer. So that's narrow AI. On the other end of the spectrum is more general AI, and that's more relational. That's where the computer can think for itself. And there's been a lot of science fiction, and some of the movies that were referenced earlier really play up on the potential of that state. So what this is what we call broad AI, and it's one step further in innovation around narrow, in the sense that the computer can understand and reason and sort of teach itself with much less training data. So for anybody who's actually implemented AI, one of the biggest pain points is that you have to have a lot of clean data and you have to ingest it into the machine. And it takes a while to, what they say, teach the AI. And they've used a lot of metaphors around AI being a child, and you really have to nourish it and educate it. This is better because it takes less training data to do it. So that means faster AI to market. And what's just done here is an experiment called Project Debater, where Watson can actually understand a question, like a debatable question, go research it, develop a 4-minute argument, present it to a human. It then listens for the human's response, understands that, calculates it, does some more research, and comes back with a rebuttal. So it's a really interesting indication of the first instance of like going back and forth, true relational type of conversational design. So a lot more to it's in its infancy now, but it has a lot of applications in different types of industries. So more to come on that. And you can learn about all those, much more detail about those 3 examples online and of course our booth outside. So I'm just going to pivot a little bit and talk about sort of the tensions that come up in the discussion around AI. Is it good for us or is it bad for us? And the question, it's a paradox. It's both. I'll just show a few examples. On the left here is Stanford University's work in detecting skin cancer using AI visioning software, so image recognition software. They've developed a way to actually spot skin cancer in very early stages at a 95% success rate. So it's a great use of image recognition. Same technology on the right. Anybody familiar with this? Yeah? It's China's social credit system, where, for those of you who've been to China, I'm sure you've seen the eyes in the sky, where they're constantly monitoring and recording their citizens' movements. And the ethical challenge that, in debate that's out there is like, is that really good? Because basically what they're doing is they're monitoring people's behavior, and based on what they do, they get access to different types of services and opportunities. So if you are not behaving well, it will have an automatic consequence on your lifestyle. And for other people in the audience, Australia is doing something quite similar. It's called the capability. Is anybody familiar with the capability? Okay, you should look that up too. Similar technology being used to sort of track citizens and behavior. Second example here, anybody know what the image is on the left? JFK unsilenced. It's an interesting piece that was done this past year where they used, it's essentially AI content creation. So what they've done is they've basically looked at all of JFK's, John F. Kennedy's speeches, and they basically created a audio dictionary, audio repository of all of his speech patterns and vocabulary, and then layered an AI engine on top of it. So what they did here is they took his speech that was going to be delivered in Dallas the day he was assassinated. They took the AI vocabulary and sound repository, applied it to that text, and actually created a very believable recreation of that speech in his voice and intonation. It was amazing. It was powerful in the sense that this great leader was unsilenced. On the right is using similar technology, similar concept of basically building up a virtual personality of voice assets, but it's combining it with CG video. So what this new technology allows is to take basically 2D images from the web, create a really high definition CG model of the face with articulation. So it's very believable of famous people, as you can see up here, President Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or others, and you get a moving articulated face, but then they apply, with a vocabulary and with a whole sound design package associated with it, but then they can feed other language and other speeches into these people's avatar. So that obviously is scary because it really is the definition of fake news. So if you can imagine Hillary Clinton delivering a "Let's Make America Great Again" speech, you can start to see how this, and in a very believable way, you can see how that can spread and cause a lot of harm. So two interesting takes on the same idea of sort of auto-generated content and sort of something to be careful of. And then the third example here is around AI predictive AI, and the positive effects of that and also possibly the negative effects. So on the left there is just a shot of, I believe it's Delta's radar display, where Delta Airlines is using new sensors on their planes as well as weather data to predict turbulence up to an hour in advance. And that's game-changing, to be able to predict turbulence at that level of that much time in advance, because then they can reroute the planes, which then saves fuel. It prevents any sort of injuries that happen on board the plane. It's a smoother ride for the customers. They can get on-time arrivals. It's just a win-win-win-win. And that's thanks to data and sensors and applying it in the right way. On the right there is an example of where predictive AI can go sideways. So this is an example of the ProPublica study that was done, where they looked at people with criminal history and applied AI to it to see if they would be repeat offenders. And unfortunately, as they did the study, they realized the AI had some racial bias baked into it. So people that were not going to be repeat offenders ended up being linked or rated as high risk. And there are a lot of other examples of this. I think Microsoft's famous community taught bot, who ultimately had a racial slant to it as well, was another example of that. So as the takeaway from that is, as you usher in this new technology, it's just you have to have a really strong sense of ethical intent behind it, so it doesn't get used in the wrong ways. So that's sort of where we are, where we're going, maybe potential pitfalls. So what do we do? How do we design for humanity? How do we make sure that technology serves humanity versus the opposite? So there's sort of three ways that we can do this. First is around principles. So I just mentioned this idea of having a value system, the right people thinking about what the positive consequences and the negative consequences are of this new technology, and thinking about it and planning for it. So at IBM, we have a trust and responsibility point of view. You can just look it up right online. It's IBM's trust and responsibility, and this goes into much more depth, but it's really based on three value statements. One is that the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. Our definition of AI is augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So always having that position is important to us. Second is that data and insights belong to our clients. We don't release it, we don't sell it, it's theirs, and we protect it as best we can. And then the third around the technology that we introduce must be transparent and explainable. So that's a really important thing. And it's not like the long legalese that you see in apps and you scroll and click accept. It's being very proactive about it, educating people, making sure they know what's happening. So keeping that transparency is really important. Because if you're transparent, you'll be able to get more feedback from more people to make it better. So the second way is to if you're thinking about principles and you have a value structure, the next thing is to think about the people being affected by this technology, and specifically AI in this context. So there's a lot of debate of the jobs that are going to be disintermediated through AI and automation. A lot of jobs are not going to be needed anymore, and that's true. But it's also going to introduce totally new jobs, more reasons, more opportunities for data scientists and what have you. It's this sort of equilibrium that happens. Some jobs will be gone, some new ones will be created, but universally, all jobs are going to change. So everyone in this room, your job is going to change in some way because of AI. So it's just up to us to think about that. Just think about that human component as you're ushering this new technology. So first one is around upskilling our current population, so they can continue to be employed in the future. So we announced recently a partnership with the Consumer Technology Association. That's the group that puts on the CES conference in Vegas every year. We're doing a huge apprentice program with them, I think in 20 states or so in the United States, with other companies to make sure that we can upskill and sort of transition people that are being affected by these new technologies into new careers. So that's exciting. The second way we're doing it is actually looking younger and looking at the kids who are in school right now and creating a program where we can create new-collar jobs. So the program that I'm referring to here is called P-Tech. It's Pathways in Technology. It's actually quite prevalent here in Australia. We have 14 schools here, P-Tech schools, as well as I think the two first were right here just outside Melbourne were created. And basically, the curriculum there is you get your 4 years of high school education, but you also get a 2-year associate's degree, learning about technology and how to learn all these new skills in the IT space. So it's a fantastic program. It's scaling around the world. It's a public-private partnership, but we're just thinking we're getting ahead of the curve. So people coming out of school have a really viable career ahead of them. And then the last is connecting people to jobs they didn't know they were even good at. So we just launched a new AI tool called Watson Talent Management, and there are a lot of different capabilities within that suite, that platform, that basically looks at people's history and their resumes and their capabilities, and it matches it to job descriptions, possibly in a different industry that they're aware of. And a particular tool we have is, I think, candidate advisory, where we actually can, using AI, start to make that match. So that's positive use of AI to connect humans to each other, and again, pull people along into this new generation of technology. And then the third area to focus on is around purpose. And I mean purpose through a design standpoint. So having a lot of intent behind and purpose behind what you put into market. So this has more of a lens through branding and experience design. So number one is when we're thinking about the technology you're putting into place, bringing as many diverse people into the fold, whether it's human-centered design techniques like design thinking or other methods to bring a broad set of people in to think about the technology, the design of it, and how you introduce it into society. That's key. So ways of working. The second is around designing feedback into the experiences that's not just based on sort of the quantitative metrics that you're tracking as far as the experience design, but also making sure you're hearing from the end user, the humans, how it's affecting their lives, and looking at that data to make sure that that informs the evolution of the product. So it's just don't lose sight of the human, right? The human outcome, not just the business outcome. And then lastly, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this third point here, is around this sense of belonging. That when you think about how technology has been ushered in the past few decades, the irony is that technology was meant to improve our lives, but in a sense, it's also sort of caused a lot of disruption and divided us. And you've all heard the phrase of FOMO, fear of missing out, and some of these other sort of social situations that have popped up due to different types of technologies. It's left this sense, this void of not feeling like you belong. So we actually did a study around this, a pretty large study, to dig into that a little bit. So to ask ourselves, are people feeling isolated and are they anxious? Is there a lot of anxiety? Number one. And then if brands come in and actually fill that void with really great experiences that sort of nurture that need for belonging, what's the business outcome for them? Are they more successful or not? So that was the hypothesis, right? If there's an issue of anxiety and brands fill it, is that better for the brand? So we did a study with Ipsos. It was in 6 countries, thousands of participants, 172 brands were actually tracked and scored on their level of driving belonging in their experiences. And the results were sort of what we expected. This is like a word cloud of some of the expectations that people had in their brand experiences. They want to be inspired, they want to feel trusted, they're reciprocated, validated, empowered. These are the words that always flew to the top. So there's clearly a need. And what's also interesting is that the brands that filled on this, there are 2 really interesting metrics. First was, over the course of 6 years, the brands that did this well grew revenue by 3x versus the ones that didn't. So that's number one. And then the second step is they'd also increased market share by 10% over the course of 3 years, just through that scoring. So if brands think about this and they redesign the experiences with humans in the forefront, business outcomes on the second, they actually ultimately have that pull through. So that was really exciting. So then we started to reverse engineer it, and we created these drivers, these brand belonging drivers that I'll just highlight 3 in the next few minutes that are basically prompts that you can use in your design teams to think about ways to tweak the experience, the service design, to make sure that you're connecting with people in the right way. So the first one I'll highlight is this idea of everyday enrichment. So enhancing people's lives through simplifying, continually improving, and infusing meaning into everyday moments. So it's that constant cadence of just everyday enrichment is what we mean here. And the example I'm showing is an app that we created, a platform for Medtronic called Sugar IQ. And it's a device, there's an application for people with diabetes. So if you're familiar with the condition, you constantly need to self-monitor your glucose levels, or you can have some serious health consequences. And it's a minute-by-minute type of exercise where you're constantly checking where your levels are and then adjusting your behavior appropriately. Using AI, we're able to predict now that there will be a spike or a drop in glucose levels up to 4 hours in advance, which is game-changing for people with this condition. I mean, they can truly live their life in a better way. And we've designed it, just from a UI standpoint, we've designed it in a very conversational UI. So it almost has like a chatbot kind of feeling to it. So you're almost like conversing with your friend, and it's giving you tips when you need to know it. So it's a really great example of using AI for the better and improving people's lives. Second one I'll just highlight here is actually a retail example. This is a new product that was just launched by the Hutchinson mobile group called Mo. It was the work that we did out of Hong Kong. And it's basically a no-contract service. But what we did is we wanted to infuse this idea of trustworthy excitement, which is this idea that you can anticipate a really great surprise and delight and feel like you're part of this community and you're being really reciprocated to and really sort of treated well by the brand. So what we did is we created this on this little video here. You can see this mystery box that appears in the mail every month or so with little gifts from the brand, and it's a little bit of that surprise and delight, but it's also that hook that keeps them engaged with the brand and moves them forward. It feels like they're part of something special. And then the third example here is highlighting another brand belonging driver called empathetic innovation. So what this project is some work that we're doing with the Department of Veteran Affairs in the United States. It's the VA. So it's the group that manages the transition of our veterans into non-military lifestyles. And the problem here is that the challenge that we're trying to solve is that on average 20 veterans commit suicide every day in the United States because that transition is so challenging for them. It's challenging from an economic standpoint, from an employment standpoint, from a camaraderie and team standpoint. They're losing this brotherhood and sisterhood they had in the military, even down to levels of new things they have to worry about on a daily basis, like what they're going to wear. I mean, serious things that cause some psychological trauma that ultimately leads to suicide. So what we've created here is using, again, AI and other technologies, we've come up with this concept of your digital self, where we sort of monitor the behaviors of people and expose that data to them so they can understand sort of where their highs and lows are, and then give them tools to help cope with that. So it's a very transparent and sort of visual way of sort of helping them through that transition. And then we've surrounded it with features like the squad, which is basically their contact list of their trusted friends and family and others and experts, a repository for skills, to learn new things, get engaged with new lifestyles, and then employment opportunities. So it's a great new tool, a great new platform. We just launched it. It's going through its sort of trial right now, but it's a great example, I think, of making sure technology serves humanity versus the opposite, and really thinking about that empathetic innovation. So in summary, if you think about three things as you go out and you're designing for humanity and making sure that we keep humans' needs in the forefront, it's having good principles, it's having thinking about the people who are affected, and then it's having that purpose in your design to make sure that you can use tools like brand belonging to just force yourself to think about those types of experiences that will make people love your brand and feel part of society better. So with that, I thank you for joining, and I'll take any questions.